The Russian and American foreign policies are by definition not contingent on morality. The ultimate and only goal of the foreign policy of both countries is to protect their own interests.
To close the case for side proposition, I look to the operation officers from Christchurch, Liza Barkova.
Dear members, at this point you have heard quite literally from almost everybody in this debate. And because of that, you will know that this is not about defending either Russia or the US. It is also not about comparing its leaders. As you have heard today, both countries have done indefensible things, and all leaders have proved to act in psychopathic ways. It is tempting to draw comparisons between the two people currently in power of both countries. Both Putin and Trump have become trademarks or symbols of the countries that they govern. But any comparison between the two individuals from a moral perspective is ultimately fallacious. A few weeks ago, Trump has stepped into office for the second time to kick off his 5th year. Putin is currently serving his 21st year as president. Even the timescales themselves show that there is little point in hyper-focusing on individual actions of individual leaders and trying to tally up how much damage each one has done to be able to understand which one is morally superior. At the same time, there is no way how we can entirely separate the foreign policies from the people who run those countries. And that is not what I'm asking you to do today. Instead, it is imperative that we take a look at the bigger scale of both countries and the moral baggage of their actions on an international level. I will try to set aside any detailed focus on individual cases which can be discussed under the context of the US and Russian foreign policies. We all know very well that things are not black and white in politics. There is a billion ways how one could defend Putin's war in Ukraine, and just as many reasons to justify the American invasion of Iraq. Hence, any level of granularity will only impede from making an objective judgment. Ultimately, I will try to prove two things to you. Firstly, that the US and Russia have equally amoral foreign policies. Secondly, as a result of this, it also means that they are morally identical, even if both can try to claim the moral high ground. Firstly, however, I would like to extend my gratitude to the President and to the rest of the committee. I was made aware today, under somewhat unusual circumstances, that I would be speaking here now. This debate means a lot to me, both because I have a close personal connection to the motion which is being discussed today, but also because I have had the pleasure of organizing this particular debate from the very start. This is my first year at this university, and I have not been part of the committee for a very long time. It is therefore an honor for me to be able to have this opportunity tonight, and it is not something that I take lightly. Mr. President, thank you. Firstly, let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, while I am a Russian citizen, born and raised in Moscow, by parents who do not speak very much English, and an alleged oligarch for a father, I promise that I am not in the business of glorifying war, death, and suffering. Not many people in this room are more closely affected by the war in Ukraine than I am. Setting aside the rationalized practicalities of it, I, like most Russians, am fully aware of the morality of what it entails. Ladies and gentlemen, among others, it is young men, boys aged the same as me, 18-year-olds, who are being sent to do the dirty work on both sides. Boys my age who are dying. Some people I could have known. I was in the UK when the news of the start of the war have broken the early morning silence. My best friend, a Russian citizen, was at the time in Kiev at a family celebration. This was the day when she was supposed to fly back to me, when the airspace has closed above Ukraine only a few hours before. The next 2 weeks we have spent on the phone while she was hiding in a parking lot under her house, which was transformed into a bunker. when she would tell me the sounds of explosions that she heard that day. She was able to escape the borders on a bus of a religious group. Not everyone is lucky enough to escape, and I'm particularly painfully aware of that, just as I am aware of the immorality of these specific circumstances. I'm also not partial towards the American claims of defending democracy and human rights, since every one of such claims is buried by a veil of generational hypocrisy, as I will go on to discuss. The president speaking before me was generous when he said that Americans are not acting in self-interest, hypocrisy being only a step or several steps beyond the immorality of blatant lies and manipulation used specifically for self-interest. I therefore do not think that the US has any foundation to claim the moral high ground. Just like Russians have been affected by the horrors of military acts in Ukraine, many Americans have been equally as affected by the results of military actions and interventions of the US. Invasion of Grenada in 1983, invasion of Panama in 1989, Iraq War, invasion of Afghanistan, Libyan intervention in the Syrian civil war. You have heard the president's speech before me. You know that the list goes on. You have also heard the treasurer on the opposition, who started with her own personal experience of it. However, the Russian and American foreign policies are by definition not contingent on morality. The ultimate and only goal of the foreign policy of both countries is to protect their own interests. Whether this is seen as selfish or virtuous by you makes little difference because the concept in itself is an amoral one. Let me be clear, by amoral I do not mean immoral, which suggests that it is violating moral principles or is deliberately wrong or evil. No, amoral means lacking a sense of morality, or being neutral or indifferent to moral considerations. It describes actions or systems that operate outside of the framework of right and wrong. Both countries heavily rely on power to achieve their aims. Yes, when possible, they try to do so with the approval of international institutions, but the lack of support from such institutions has not and will not ever stop either of these countries from pursuing whatever their goals are. The international courts have not prevented the US from commencing drone attacks in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, which led to extrajudicial killings. Later in time, they simply threatened to sanction the ICJ and the ICC against any moralist argument, suggesting that the international courts threaten US sovereignty. They themselves deny the validity of moralist arguments. Ladies and gentlemen, shouldn't we be thinking of this? This is saying something to us. Similarly, Russia accepts the rulings of International Court of Justice only on a case-to-case basis. It is not a member of the International Criminal Court and was expelled from the European Court of Human Rights. The only underlying motivation for these countries is and will always be power. Power as a way to ensure that these countries do everything in their own interest, and hence power as an end in itself. But power itself is a concept without morality. Asking whether this power is moral or immoral is like asking what color sound is or what does sleep taste like. It is not a question that has an answer to it. This is not to say that both countries do not employ the rhetoric of morality and ethics in their positions. However, all of this is only a manifestation of pragmatism, which is easily digested by the general masses. The sole existence of Guantanamo Bay is the pinnacle of American pragmatism. Human rights and values are only of any interest until they are interrogating the alleged members of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. The US government argued that Guantanamo was chosen because it was outside the US legal jurisdiction, allowing the detention of prisoners without granting them the constitutional rights they would have on US soil. They are not denying anything. Yet again, my goal is not to defend these organizations, but it's almost amusing to see how any mention of rights dissolves the moment that it is no longer in the interest of the American image. In the same way, claiming that Russia logically picks out the steps to maximize human suffering or any other sort of immoral acts is equally as irrational. Throughout the last couple of years, Russia has been blatantly clear about exactly what its aims are, and it would be ignorant to claim that pragmatism has not been the only sentiment that it has expressed. It would perhaps be an important argument if it were true that the actions of America have resulted in a positive outcome around the world, while the Russian ones have not. I can promise you now that this is not what the Russian media is saying. They're saying the exact opposite, that the Russians are the ones saving the world, whilst the Americans are the ones harming it. However, it is worth nothing trying to argue whose propaganda should be trusted, since the positive outcome is, at the end of the day, not the goal either. The positive outcome is a mere side effect which can be effectively weaponized against any opposition. Any positive outcome is quickly snatched up and used and abused. The goal in itself is power, and power is pragmatic, and pragmatism is amoral. The last speaker on the opposition has mentioned fear and ambition. But why do we think that either fear or ambition in themselves are moral either? Power, fear, ambition, none of these claims have any moral value to them. So if that is the case, then how can we say that one is any different than the other? How is amoral any different from amoral? It is all good and well to pick out what the consequences of certain political actions are, but the moral value of these actions is post facto assigned to them by us. Ladies and gentlemen, we assign things value which was never there in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, do not let us be hypocrites ourselves. Let us not judge policies based on values that we have assigned to them ourselves. Let us recognize that at their heart, neither country gives a damn about what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. There is no moral difference because there is no morality in it. Therefore, I urge you to vote for proposition. Thank you.